Hello, and welcome to the 4th Annual Federal Research Update webinar. My name is Dr. Heather Brown. I'm the Director of Grant Writing and Publications at the University of Missouri-Columbia, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to this event. Our webinar is sponsored by the University of Missouri-Columbia, the National Association of College and University Business Officers, and the Florida High-Tech Corridor Council, an economic development initiative of the State University System of Florida. During this broadcast, if you have any technical problems, issues, or concerns, please send an email to federalupdate@missouri.edu. You can use that same email address if you have a question that you'd like our presenter to answer at the end of their presentation. Again, that email is federalupdate@missouri.edu. Finally, we've got viewers joining us from across the country, and as a result, we'll be going, instead of using specific times to indicate when the next speaker will start, we're going to use phrases such as top of the hour and bottom of the hour. So right now, I am very honored to introduce Mr. Michael Sieverts. Michael is Director of the Budget Division at the National Science Foundation. He has 25 years of federal government experience in budgeting, policy analysis, and public and legislative affairs. The Budget Division, located within the Office of Budget, Finance, and Award Management, is responsible for the development, analysis, and execution of the Foundation's annual budget request to the Office of Management and Budget and the Congress. Previously at NSF, he worked for 10 years in the Office of Legislative and Public Affairs, working as a policy analyst, speechwriter, section head, and as acting director. Before joining NSF, Michael was a budget analyst from 1986 to 1991 at the U.S. Congressional Budget Office. Michael, I'm turning it over to you.
Okay, well, thank you, Heather, and I'm pleased to join all of you today. I figure I think I'm the last thing between everyone and our trick-or-treating this evening, so I'll try to keep this moving quickly and leave time for discussion when I'm done. As Heather noted, I've got 25 years in this domain surrounding the federal budget, specifically the federal budget for science and technology. And so almost all of the time in that period, I've been in some way involved in how the budget and these investments look to policymakers, be they in Congress, be they at OMB, and I'm going to try to provide some of that context as I go through this talk today. And so just sort of to provide some background, some framing. So I head the budget division at NSF, and that is the principal organization within NSF for planning and formulation and execution of the budget, as well as with a major role in performance assessment and evaluation activities. And so this circle is a very generic feedback loop that often is used to present the budget process as a whole. But today I'm pretty much going to be talking about the formulation side of it. How do what influences the priorities that go into the budget, and how do they show up in documents that you would see that would assist you and maybe provide some guidance for you as you're developing proposals to NSF. So I'm going to do this from a number of levels. I really want to emphasize that when you're thinking about coming to NSF with a proposal, don't lose sight of the things that are enduring at NSF. Don't lose sight of the things that really stand out at a higher level for NSF. And then I'm going to focus on the annual budget and investment priorities that will be key to specific opportunities. But regardless of what those specific opportunities are, there are various facets of NSF that you should never lose sight of, and I'm going to cover those. Now, if we hadn't had Superstorm Sandy over the last few days and you'd heard some of the talks that were scheduled for earlier in the week, a lot of what I'm going to say is going to echo what Kay Kozumi from OSTP would have told you about some of the administration priorities. My colleague Jeremy Leffler from NSF's policy office would have been here to tell you about various aspects of the proposal and award process, and he would have covered some of these things from the merit review, about the merit review criteria. I'm going to, I'm going to cover those things in a very high, 30,000 feet way, just to show how they tie into what NSF's annual priorities may look like. But so if you get a chance to see their talks, either on tape or at another time, definitely do that, because they will provide additional insight into the issues I'm going to be presenting today. So I'm really going to jump in right now and start with NSF's merit review criteria. Now, these aren't budget priorities in any way. You can look in our 400 pages of the budget document, and I'm not even sure the criteria are in there. But whenever you come to NSF with a proposal, regardless of what area it's in, these are NSF's priorities. When you want to get funded by NSF, you may have the activity that is tied as well as it possibly can be to an annual budget priority or to a particular area we're emphasizing. But if the proposal does not keep these squarely in its sights, it won't do very well in our merit review process. So that's why I refer to these as one of our enduring priorities. The merit review criteria, intellectual merit and broader impacts, I say these are always priorities for NSF, and they cut across everything we do. So don't lose sight of those as I go through in more detail. In the same way, the NSF Strategic Plan provides overarching priorities for the foundation, especially the first two of these. Now, we have a strategic plan. We've been out for a couple of years now, empowering the nation through discovery and innovation. And really the first two goals, transform the frontiers, innovate for society. Again, these are enduring priorities for NSF. They are philosophies, practices we seek to emphasize. The third strategic goal, which is incredibly important to me and others who work at NSF, performs a model organization, probably doesn't fit in as well to the work you would be doing in submitting to NSF, but it is something we highlight and we pay very close attention to in our operations at the foundation. And it actually has a lot to do with how we respond to you and the mechanisms we set up to get your feedback and to serve you better as, when you come to NSF with proposals. So, I wanted to highlight that as well. So, another enduring priority is the one NSF philosophy. If you've heard the NSF director, Subra Suresh, speaking in public at any time since he became director just over 2 years ago, this is very important to him, and you will see it referred to in any number of NSF documents and publications. And the first phrase of it really does capture what it's about. Enable seamless operations across organizational and disciplinary boundaries. So that shows up programmatically in a lot of ways, and when I get to the annual budget priorities that NSF has established, they really capture this one NSF philosophy of working across boundaries. At the same time, an equally important aspect of one NSF is that it challenges us to look at ourselves internally. How are we structuring ourselves? How do our operations need to adapt to new business practices? And how can we structure our business practices so if we want to do something like transform the frontiers or promote interdisciplinary activities, what do we need to do operationally to make that happen? And that often, again, comes back to the feedback we get from you or what we learned from you through the review process or from what we see from you in the proposals you submit or the kinds of questions you ask at a session like today. So keep that in mind as we go forward, because we take good notes. So just a quick snapshot of the 2013 budget request. So this is a budget request that is for the fiscal year that just began 31 days ago. So It is still a budget request under consideration by the Congress. I'll come back to that before I close today, but I wanted to just give you a sense of the framework we're operating in. We have a solid request. It's even in this time of fiscal constraints, the administration sought a significant increase for NSF, $340 million over the 2012 level. It reflects a commitment by the administration to double investments in basic research by NSF and other agencies in the government. And it emphasizes ways that fundamental research can contribute to addressing national challenges. So again, that's something that I'll come back to as I go through the talk. I just wanted to remind people, I'm not sure many people are actually familiar with how the NSF budget is parsed out in terms of dollars. The first two lines on this, the account levels, the research and related activities account, the education and human resources account, those are the funding sources for the dollars you would be applying for if you came to NSF with a proposal. The third account on the list, the major research equipment and facilities construction account, that's, as the title implies, is a account strictly for selected projects. There are only about 4 or 5 projects in that portfolio. If you're involved in those, we're glad to have you be working with you. You know who you are, but for most people coming to NSF, you'll be seeking funding for R&RA and EHR. The other 3 accounts on this, Agency Operations and Award Management, National Science Board, Office of the Inspector General, those are strictly administrative accounts tied to our operational activities. So they wouldn't be a source of grant funding. But one of the points we want to emphasize for this FY13 request is when the administration put significant resources into NSF going forward, all of those additional resources are in the program accounts, the research and related activity and the education and resources account. So that just is a statement about the NSF's commitment to funding our programs and to keeping the nation moving forward in these areas. Another aspect, or another place where the enduring principles, the enduring priorities get translated into the annual budget process are these guiding principles that our senior managers keep in mind when we're formulating the budget. We want to maintain our commitments to existing awards, so we make sure we're funding either major facility projects or the awards we've made in prior years that have continuing commitments. We want to keep those commitments. We want to protect investments in human capital like the graduate research fellowships and other major human capital programs. We're always seeking innovative approaches to cutting-edge challenges. I'm going to highlight a couple of those as we go forward. And we're always looking to adopt more efficient organizational practices, again, that relies a lot on the feedback we get from you on ways we can serve you better. So now I'm going to do a little bit of a sleight of hand here. I'm going to talk about priorities, and I'm going to jump across fiscal years in a slightly confusing way. But you'll see there's a method to my madness. So the most influential document for agencies, federal R&D agencies, to set their priorities is the annual memo that comes out of the Office of Management and Budget and the Office of Science and Technology Policy about the priorities for the overall government science and technology portfolio. So that's a public document. It's on the OMB website. It's on the OSTP website. It came out earlier this year. This is the document for FY 2014. I'm using it here, number one, because it's the most recent one. So it really does set things up for what you should be seeing from the administration. As I go forward, I'm going to be talking about our FY 2013 budget request and the investments there. Part of this is because the FY 2014 process is already underway, and we are at that point in the process where NSF and OMB are developing the budget that the President will submit to the Congress next year, and that means I can't talk about it in public now. But the good news is that for telling the story of the FY13 budget, the FY14 administration priorities work very well. And so I can cross those fiscal years quite comfortably to give you a sense of how the administration's priorities reflect directly to the major investments that NSF has identified. And as I said earlier, if Kei Kozumi had been able to do one of the earlier sessions of this, he would have covered this in greater detail about the administration's priorities. But that's where, this slide really shows what NSF investments map to the administration's overall priorities. So the column on the left, the OMB OSTP priorities, those come directly from the memo, and then there's a corresponding NSF investment in each area. So, for example, the first ones, and here I had to put on my glasses in order to keep up. Support for job creation, advanced manufacturing, emerging technologies. There you'll see the NSF investments in cyber-enabled materials manufacturing and smart systems. That covers the administration's investments in advanced manufacturing, as well as activities like the Materials Genome Initiative. We've had a program enhancing access to the radio spectrum. It is focused on better ways to use wireless and get the most out of the available spectrum. And then we have Cyber Infrastructure Framework for 21st Century Science and Engineering. Administration's been emphasizing the clean energy economy. The NSF major investment in that area is science, engineering, education for sustainability. Administration emphasized secure and reliable cyberspace. NSF, we have an investment under a government-wide framework, Comprehensive National Cybersecurity Initiative. More important, more directly for NSF, secure and trustworthy cyberspace is a major investment we've identified. Bioeconomy, we have a program we call Biomaps, research at the interface of biological, mathematical, and physical sciences. The administration priority, support for the next generation of scientific leaders. Here, NSF has a general leadership role in STEM education, as well as a newer activity called Expeditions in Education. And we also have, finally, the administration has an ongoing priority for accelerating innovations from the laboratory to the market. And here, the NSF ICORE program, the Innovation Core, is a major focus for us. So this next slide just restates those items I mentioned. I'll also point out that there are two bullets at the bottom of this slide that I didn't mention as I went through that list earlier. There are two government-wide priorities, the National Nanotechnology Initiative, Networking and Information Technology, Research and Development, NITR-D, that also are ongoing priorities for NSF, and there will be specific opportunities associated with those, although at NSF they are more general now. We have been involved in those for a number of years, and so you're more likely to find funding for those associated with our ongoing programs, either in engineering or computer science or some of the areas in mathematical and physical sciences. So I mentioned the activity we have that ties to the administration's overall emphasis on the clean energy economy. Science, Engineering, Education for Sustainability. This is SEAS. Is the acronym. It's been involved. NSF established this investment a couple of years ago. It's a cross-NSF investment, and it looks at system-level approaches focused on environmental, economic sustainability, and sustainable human well-being. These are some specific areas that are funded under the SEAS activity. There are often specific solicitations in these areas, so if you're interested in these are really just pointers. I'm not going to go over these in any detail, but these should help you find useful places on our website where you can get more information. Inspire is an activity that really is tied to an ongoing NSF emphasis on interdisciplinary research and transformative research. I think we won some kind of special award for acronyms on this one. Integrative NSF Support Promoting Interdisciplinary Research and Education, INSPIRE. So this has creative research awards for transformative interdisciplinary ventures, the creative program. This is currently, is a competition currently underway, and we're also looking at pilot mechanisms in this coming, well, the current fiscal year, the new fiscal year, where there's going to be a vehicle for funding larger mid-scale awards. And here mid-scale is quite general. I know we often associate the term mid-scale with instrumentation, but this is going to be a broader activity for looking at ways to fund groups and centers, and as well as more infrastructure-focused activities. ICORE is a set of smaller awards. This activity is one of these activities that is both a really forward-looking way to engage the research community and a new approach to some fundamental business processes at NSF. This one takes work that's already been funded by NSF. So if you haven't been funded by NSF, ICORE is not a vehicle for you. You already need NSF funding in order to come to us with a potential ICORE proposal that really has some promise in the commercial arena. And this is taking work previously funded by NSF and creating a network of mentors and entrepreneurs and even potentially closer links to the venture capital arena, and saying, all right, how do we test the potential viability of some promising research results for their commercialization? And so that's where ICORE comes into play. And I guess we just missed one deadline, but I think there'll be other deadlines coming up in the not too distant future. Cyber Infrastructure Framework for 21st Century Science and Engineering. This is the classic science push technology pull of investments that both find better ways to use the leading edge technologies, the most advanced supercomputing and high performance computing capabilities, as well as how science can take advantage of those capabilities. So you've got the people on the computational side saying, all right, how do these capabilities need to be structured so that science can take advantage of them? And then from the other side, from the science side, all right, what are some major scientific challenges that we need to make the computational side aware of so they can adapt and structure themselves to help us push forward in different areas. So this is it's an ongoing classic dynamic in both fundamental science and the more technological fields. So this is a framework that NSF is going to continue to pursue going forward. Expeditions in Education is an ongoing activity at NSF. I don't want to emphasize the budget aspects of it as much as I do the performance and the philosophical aspects of it. This is taking opportunities to look at the best ways to teach science, especially at the undergraduate level, and also look at the most promising science coming out of university laboratories, major NSF facilities, and say, okay, we want that cutting edge science brought closer to students, but we want it done in ways that takes advantage of the best possible ways to teach science. So that's where these expeditions, so where it'll be a limited number of expeditions starting out, but it will be that mix of theory, of educational theory, cutting edge research, and fundamental practice. And again, if you're thinking about something in this area, you definitely need to contact NSF before you submit, because they this would require some very careful structuring in order to fit with some of the initial approaches we plan to take. And then finally, I'm not even going to try to go through this sheet today. My glasses aren't nearly strong enough. But this is a little bit of a cheat sheet we've prepared. What this does, if you can blow it up when you want to look at it, I've taken that earlier slide where we took the administration priorities and the NSF investments, and then in the third column are just an array of reports that have come out either from the administration, from major government studies associated with government, perhaps National Academy of Sciences studies, as well, and studies from within NSF, especially those from the National Science Board, and they provide some additional background and context for the NSF investments that are tied to these areas. So if you're a science policy wonk like I am, this is just useful info to have. If you're applying in one of these areas, these various reports can provide useful information and context for the types of motivations we have for setting up these investment priorities. And this is my final slide. I don't know how we're doing on time. I'll take a quick look. Oh, okay, about halfway through. Since it's Halloween, I couldn't conclude without saying something scary, and that's where I'm going to talk about the status of the fiscal year 2013 budget. We are now operating under a 6-month continuing resolution. It goes through the end of next March. We are at our current operating level, meaning our current operating level means last year's operating level, so that whether we can do all the things I just described for fiscal year 2013 will be determined in the coming weeks and months. Much of this could come to a head in the next few weeks following the election with a lame duck session of Congress. You've certainly heard about sequestration. You've certainly heard about what many people refer to as the fiscal cliff. That could be spurring action and may resolve many of these issues well before the end of this continuing resolution in March. May not. We may continue there, but all we really know is that we can't say anything more with any certainty until after the November elections and the beginning of the lame duck session of Congress. So with that, I can conclude my talk. I'll turn it back to Heather, who I think will have a few questions. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Michael. For all of our listeners out there, if you have some questions, go ahead and send them to federalupdate@missouri.edu, and I will pass them along to Michael Sieverts from the Budget Division at NSF. Again, that email address is federalupdate@missouri.edu. We have a couple of questions already. First one, will NSF continue to consider research experience for undergraduates a high priority? And will funding increase for these programs?
Yes, NSF will continue to consider research experience for undergraduates a high priority, the REU program. It's one of these things I call an enduring priority for NSF. It is an activity that is very much investigator and PI driven. It has potential links to some of the areas I highlighted, like the expeditions and education. And it also has a definite link to that guiding principle I cited about supporting investment in human capital. So the REU program is something that I truly consider an enduring priority for NSF. So that program definitely will continue to be supported.
Okay, another question. What is the outlook for the mentoring through critical transition points and for the scholarship for service or cyber operations programs?
I can take the second one. The first one is hard. I don't know as much about, so I'll just have to pass. And if you send me a follow-up, I can get the information on that. Scholarships for service is, just in terms of the budget picture, is very solidly funded. It has incredibly strong support in the administration and in the Congress. So that program is, I know, is doing very well, and we're constantly looking at ways to both support the scholarships program and to support efforts to build more capacity in those areas.
Okay, again, if you have a question for Michael Sieverts, please send it to federalupdate@missouri.edu. Again, federalupdate@missouri.edu. We have a question here about small business investment. Are we likely to see an increased focus on small business or partnerships with industry in research funding in the future?
Yes. The most important development in that area occurred right at the end of last calendar year. Almost, I think it might even have been on New Year's Eve. In last year's defense authorization bill, the set aside for small business, the Small Business Innovation Research Program and the Small Business Technology Transfer Program was increased. So, and it was reauthorized. So I should reverse that. It was reauthorized for several years. The whole entire program was, and the funding allocation for that was increased. The funding for that program is determined by an overall share of the agency's R&D budgets, and the share is increasing from just under 3%, 3.5%, and then going up slightly over the next several years. So that funding has increased. And what was the other part of that question? Partnerships with industry programs?
Yes.
Yes, those are continuing. Those are a major emphasis of the administration. One of the priorities from the OMB OSTP memo, and the NSF ICORE program is really our flagship in that area right now.
Okay, another question. What is the outlook for the National Nanotechnology Initiative? Is it being renewed?
Is it being renewed? That may be terminology I wouldn't use precisely. The initiative remains an ongoing priority of the administration, and the emphasis of the last several years has been on aspects of it that are called the NNI signature initiatives. So those are investments in specific areas like nanomanufacturing that have put a specific focus on a particular aspect of nanoscience and technology. And I think in that really small fonted slide I had up, there's more documentation on the NNI and where it stands right now.
Okay, again, if you have a question for Michael Sieverts, please send it to federalupdate@missouri.edu. That email address again is federalupdate@missouri.edu. Question, could you please elaborate on the opportunities within the Big Data Initiative?
The best way to approach the Big Data Initiative. So Big Data is a term used in an overarching sense, including in the OMB OSTP memo. So it's ways of managing data. NSF's efforts under Big Data are centered around the CIF21 initiative I mentioned, Cyber Infrastructure Framework for 21st Century Science and Engineering. And within that, there is an area that I'm going to say the acronym first because that may help you remember what the entire term stands for. CDS&E, Computational and Data Enabled Science and Engineering. And that would be the major focus for NSF in that area. And it's perhaps the single largest component of NSF's CIF21 emphasis in FY 2013.
Okay. Again, if you have a question for Michael Sieverts, please send it to federalupdate@missouri.edu. One question that we have is, are there any areas currently funded by NSF that you foresee as being less of a priority in the future?
Are there any areas funded by NSF that I see as being less of a priority in the future? Well, since this is where I will lean on the framework I used earlier in the talk, where there are always enduring priorities at NSF. And the great challenge for NSF is that as the principal agency to support basic research, we always have a responsibility to fund basic research and education across all areas of science and engineering. So NSF is supposed to be that balance wheel in the federal portfolio. So as soon as I say something might be less of a priority, well, that's an area where NSF may be the area that it has to step into and say no. If other areas are stepping away from something, I mean, if other agencies are stepping away from a particular area, that may be an area where NSF needs to step up. So that question is a major challenge. So I would hesitate to say that there's any area where NSF would just be saying, oh no, that's less of a priority. We know that certain areas are higher priority, those that are aligned with the administration's initiatives, but then whatever area you're in, if you have your focus on those enduring priorities like the merit review criteria, there should be an opportunity for you at NSF.
Thank you. Again, if you have a question for Michael Sieverts, please send it to federalupdate@missouri.edu. And we have a question here on K12 Science education. Can you give any information regarding proposals that focus on K12 science education, specifically in terms of number of proposals funded versus those received?
I can't do that offhand. I know that the numbers in general are close to the overall NSF funding rates. In general, some of the programs in K12 have more specific eligibility criteria, like the Math and Science Partnership. So you may see some change in the funding rate, but in general, the funding rates for those activities are in the 20 to 30% range. So they may be a little bit above the overall NSF average, but they are still incredibly competitive. And then you'll have a number of activities like the Robert Noyce Scholarship Program and as I mentioned, the Math and Science Partnership, where the eligibility criteria, the institutional frameworks required to participate, require a lot of work ahead of time to lay the groundwork for those proposals.
Okay. Another question coming in. Are there any awards that are best suited for new investigators?
Are there any awards that are best suited for new investigators? Well, this is where I would definitely say seek out a program officer in a given area. We have various routes into NSF that may be better suited for new investigators. The career program is the most promising one. This is for young faculty, early career investigators. Again, that in any particular area, the program officer for that could give you more information. And then if you're, some of the smaller mechanisms, I shouldn't say smaller, but some of the faster turnaround mechanisms. We have rapid awards, which are short-term for specific opportunities, eager, which are funding for early stage research, may not be ready for a full proposal. Again, those are things that where an experienced NSF program officer can give you a lot of guidance on the best way to engage NSF.
Okay, thank you. We had a couple questions from an earlier presentation that might actually be suitable here. Can you tell us a little bit about any sort of funding that's available to develop instruments that measure environmental impacts?
Okay, so the most general funding for instruments would be through the Major Research Instrumentation Program. That is an annual competition, and you will be able to find, if you go to the NSF website, you can definitely get a link directly to that. In environmental instrumentation, there probably are various activities specifically under the SEAS initiative, the Science, Engineering, and Education for Sustainability, where that could factor in. And then I very briefly mentioned our major research equipment and facilities construction account. One of the projects being funded right now is the National Ecological Observatory Network, and there may be opportunities under that for sensor development. I mean, the project has many sensors. A lot of them are, it has the ability for prototype testing. So you may actually want to visit the NEON website and see if there are opportunities there for people to come in with testing new kinds of sensors.
Thank you. Again, if you have a question for Michael Sieverts, please send it to federalupdate@missouri.edu. We have a question here about the basic science of genomics. Considering that both NSF and NIH might deal with genomics, does the NSF consider genomics to be a fundable area, or is it better to submit proposals like that to the NIH?
NSF definitely considers genomics to be a fundable area. Where the distinction between NSF and NIH would occur is if it's genomics related to human health, it probably would not be a good fit for NSF, although that is not 100% hard and fast rule. There are areas of that where NSF would fund it, but that would be much less likely. Where genomics could be related to plants and other organisms, non-human organisms, there definitely are opportunities at NSF, most likely in molecular and cellular biology and some in environmental biology.
Okay, thank you. Again, questions for for Michael Sievert, please send your questions to federalupdate@missouri.edu. At 5:30 p.m. we have a speaker who's coming up who's going to talk about sequestration in a broader picture.
Who's that?
Shai Akabas.
Okay.
And big question though is he's going to give the big picture. Can you tell us anything about the discussions that are happening within NSF about the agency's response to this potential situation?
Well, I can't say much. The administration is, very clear in its position that sequestration should not occur. I mean, there's no reason for sequestration to occur. The sequestration transparency report that the administration issued just over a month ago stated the position that the President's budget achieved sufficient deficit reduction to obviate the need for sequestration in 2013. The President is definitely committed to working with Congress to remove the sequestration requirement for this year. And we, as agencies, we are simply aware that we will face roughly an 8% reduction in those areas, and we're just doing internal planning, but none of it is ready for public consumption yet.
Okay, thank you. And how can people keep abreast of that trend development?
I would say that you will probably get much more forthcoming information from the speaker coming later today. There are very good resources available on websites around Washington, and generally the information reported in the media is quite accurate. And the key development will be the progress of the session of Congress that will occur in November and December. That is where much more information will come out, and until then the information won't really be very useful. It'll be much more speculation. Come November and December, there'll be much more reliable information coming out.
Okay, thank you very much. If you have a question that pops up to you later that you have not had a chance to ask, you can feel free to send it to federalupdate@missouri.edu and we'll get it to Michael Sievert. Otherwise, Michael's email address is listed in his presentation. You can also feel free to email him directly. But again, thank you so much for being with us today. And our next speaker is actually not going to be either at the bottom or the top of the hour. We're going to have a little delay. He is going to come in at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 4:30 p.m. Central. So please, if you're able to, come back at that time, and we will have a rousing discussion on sequestration. So thank you very much for being with us today.
You're very welcome. Thank you.